Rex Harrison found Carole Landis on the bathroom floor at 1465 Capri Drive, Pacific Palisades, July 5, 1948. He felt for a pulse. Then he left. He didn't call a doctor. He didn't call the police. He drove to a friend's house on Napoli Drive. Several hours passed before anyone dialed for help. By the time authorities arrived, a second note, reportedly addressed to Harrison, had already disappeared from the bedroom. Carole Landis was 29 years old. Rex Harrison showed up at her funeral with his wife. 3 days later, he sat in a coroner's inquest beside his studio boss, Carole F. Zanuck, and told the deputy coroner he had no idea why she was dead. Said he knew nothing about a second note. Said they were just friends. This is the story of what actually happened, and who made sure no one would ask too many questions about it. Old Money Scandals. Subscribe it. Before we follow Rex Harrison into that house, you need to understand what Carole Landis had already survived to get there. She was born Frances Lillian Mary Ritzton Fairchild, Wisconsin, on New Year's Day, 1919. Her father, a drifting railroad mechanic, abandoned the family before she could form a memory of him. Her mother, Clara, raised 5 children on almost nothing in San Bernardino, California. What Carole inherited from that childhood was not bitterness. It was clarity. She understood that beauty was a form of currency, that charm was a survival mechanism, and that the world she wanted was not going to open its doors simply because she wanted it to. So she forced them open herself. 15, she married. The marriage was annulled within months. She married the same man again in August 1934, and the two of them went to California together to try something different. That didn't work either. By the time she was 17, she had already been legally married and legally unmarried, twice to the same person. Most women in San Bernardino in 1936 would have stopped there, settled, accepted a quiet trajectory laid out for them. Carole ran to San Francisco instead. She worked nightclubs. She called herself Carole Landis, a name she constructed deliberately, with the same precision she applied to everything else about her public self. She sang. She danced. She learned the specific mechanics of a room, how to read an audience, how to hold a space, how to make 100 strangers feel she was performing only for them. By the time she arrived in Hollywood in 1937, she had already logged more hours on a stage than most actors twice her age. Warner Brothers gave her a contract. Then they used her as wallpaper. She appears in the background of A Star is Born. She has a single line in A Day at the Races. She moves through the frames of The Adventures of Robin Hood as one of a dozen interchangeable faces. 3 years of bit parts, one-liners, faces in crowds. She kept working. She did not stop. In 1939, Hal Roach cast her as Loanna in 1 Million BC, a prehistoric epic that required her to wear animal skins, run from unconvincing reptiles, and project desire and terror with minimal dialogue. Critics noticed her. Trade publications ran photographs. The fan mail doubled. For the first time in her Hollywood career, the machinery of the industry was actually paying attention. 20th Century Fox came calling. She signed. And here is where the story gets complicated, as it always did with powerful men and women who had no institutional protection. The deal at Fox, according to multiple accounts from people who worked there at the time, came with an unspoken condition. Carole F. Zanuck, who ran the studio with the particular arrogance of a man who had never once in his professional life been told no by someone he found attractive, expected a personal arrangement alongside the professional one. The chicken and egg question of which came first, the contract or the affair, is not entirely resolvable from the public record. What the record does establish clearly is that while the arrangement held, Carole worked in good pictures. And when she ended it, she didn't. During the relationship with Zanuck, she landed alongside Betty Grable in Moon Over Miami and I Wake Up Screaming, both in 1941. She was cast in My Gal Sal opposite Rita Hayworth the following year, originally as the lead. When she ended the affair with Zanuck, according to multiple sources including biographer Eric Ganz's account, Zanuck demoted her and gave the lead to Hayworth instead. Carole received second billing in a film she had been promised would be hers. She was never the lead at Fox after that. The studio assigned her to B Pictures, loaned her out to RKO 3 times. The invitations to the good projects stopped. The critics who had been writing about her fresh-faced promise stopped writing. The fan profiles in the movie magazines, the ones with the warm lighting and the careful poses and the headlines about Hollywood's newest discovery, dried up and disappeared. She was 23 years old when Darryl Zanuck decided she was done being useful to him. She kept working anyway. In late 1942, when the Hollywood Victory Committee began organizing entertainment for American troops overseas, Carole Landis volunteered. Not for the publicity. She had learned by then that Fox publicity worked for Fox, not for her. She volunteered because she thought it mattered. She joined Martha Raye, Kay Francis, and dancer Mitzi Mayfair on the only all-female USO tour to travel to both England and North Africa during the war. She came back ill, amoebic dysentery, malaria, and near-fatal pneumonia contracted overseas, and she came back changed. She wrote a book about it. For Jill's in a Jeep, a genuine first-hand account of what she witnessed, what the men she entertained were facing, what it felt like to perform comedy in tense, near-active frontlines. The book was honest. Fox turned it into a promotional vehicle in 1944, with all 4 women playing themselves. When it was released, critics called it self-congratulatory. Carole had traveled more than 125,000 miles entertaining troops, had nearly died twice in the process, had written a book that put the experience on record, and the industry she had spent 15 years trying to crack responded by calling it self-praise. Her Fox contract was dropped after having Wonderful Crime in 1945. She was 26. She had been married 3 times. She had survived 2 near-fatal illnesses. She had been systematically demoted by the most powerful man at the studio that employed her. And she had done all of this while maintaining, for the fan magazines, for the publicity photographs, for the carefully curated public record of Carole Landis, the performance of a woman who was doing fine, actually, who was thrilled to be working, who was grateful, always grateful, for everything she had been given. She had given considerably more than she had received. The industry did not consider that a relevant point. By 1947, the trajectory was clear to anyone paying attention. Her Fox contract was gone. Her marriage to pilot Thomas Wallace had ended in 1945 after he demanded she give up acting and be a housewife. Her subsequent marriage to millionaire Broadway producer Horace Schmidlap was dissolving. They were struggling with infertility, growing apart, spending months on separate coasts. Her health remained fragile from the wartime illnesses. She was 28 years old, working for Eagle Lion Films, a B-picture company so far below the Fox tier that it barely registered in the trade publications. She went to England to make 2 pictures, Noose and Brass Monkey, not the films of a rising career, but she was working, and England was different from Hollywood in the ways that mattered. The social machinery was different. The scrutiny was different. The people were different. In the summer of 1947, Rex Harrison was in England too. He was at the height of what he would later call his first serious period of stardom, working on Escape for Fox, recently returned from the theatrical success that had been building his reputation on both sides of the Atlantic. He was handsome in the way that well-trained British actors of that era were handsome, controlled, deliberate, performing ease with such precise fluency that the performance became invisible. He was also, famously, married to Lily Palmer. Carole was staying at the same London hotel. According to the book Carole Landis, A Most Beautiful Girl by biographer Eric Gans, the affair had actually begun earlier that year in Hollywood, and was already an open secret in certain circles by the time both of them were in England. In London, they stopped pretending. They were seen together at nightclubs. They were seen together at parties. The wife of director John Huston later recalled a confrontation between Carole and Lily Palmer at a July 1947 party. A moment of social collision that everyone present apparently agreed to remember vaguely. When they returned to Los Angeles, the arrangement continued. And here is the detail that matters, the one that explains everything that followed. According to Carole Landis, A Tragic Life in Hollywood, Harrison had told Carole he was going to leave Lily Palmer, not suggested it, not implied it in the way that men conducting affairs will sometimes imply things in moments of emotional proximity. Told her, made it specific enough that she acted on it. She filed for divorce from Horace Schmidlap in May 1948, citing extreme mental cruelty. She hired attorney Jerry Giesler, the most prominent criminal defense lawyer in Los Angeles, which tells you something about what kind of legal situation she was anticipating. She told Schmidlap she wanted only the house and her personal belongings. She put the house up for sale immediately after. She had already signed on to a new picture for Eagle Lion, The Amazing X, with a start date in mid-August. She was planning to return to England. She was building toward something. On March 16, 1948, the gossip columnist Walter Winchell published a piece predicting that Rex Harrison would become Carole Landis's next husband. The item exploded through Hollywood's social networks the way Winchell items always did. Fast, loud, and impossible to contain. Darryl Zanuck, who still ran Fox and still oversaw Harrison's contract, called Harrison into his office. He told Harrison plainly that he would not be leaving Lily Palmer for Carole Landis. For additional leverage, according to accounts published in the Vintage News, Zanuck informed Harrison of Carole's prior relationships, including, pointedly, his own, presumably in the hope that this information would cool Harrison's interest. It did not. After completing Unfaithfully Yours for Fox that spring, an irony so pointed that it almost doesn't need noting, Harrison returned to Carole. Lily Palmer went to New York to stay with her sister. Harrison and Carole had the summer almost to themselves. On July 2, 1948, 3 days before she died, Carole went shopping on Rodeo Drive with a friend. She spent more than $300 on new clothes. Her friend later told reporters that Carole said, "I've never been so happy in all my life. The sun's shining. It's a wonderful day." That same afternoon, she ran into writer Crawford Dixon on the street. He asked her about marrying Harrison. She replied, "Oh, I'd love to marry him. But you know how those things are." Crawford Dixon said she looked well. She looked lighter than he'd seen her in some time. This was 3 days before the last dinner. July 4, 1948. Independence Day. The party at 1465 Capri Drive began at noon. Carole hosted it at the pool, friends, neighbors, people she liked. She went swimming. By multiple accounts, she was in excellent spirits. Talkative, warm, full of plans. She told her guests they needed to leave by early evening because she was having a private dinner. This was the 7th consecutive evening Rex H. Harrison had eaten at her table. Her maid, Fannie Mae Bolden, later told the coroner's inquest that Harrison had come to dinner every night that week, and that Carole had been in a very happy mood in the days before her death. Not anxious, not distressed, happy. At 6 in the evening, according to the detailed timeline reconstructed by the Carole Landis estate website, Carole changed into a plaid skirt, a white blouse, and gold sandals. She was wearing her favorite gold cross and a Street Christopher medal. Harrison arrived. They had scotch and sodas before dinner. The meal was cold roast chicken, tossed salad, and a lemon chiffon pie that Carole had made herself. At some point during that dinner, Rex Harrison ended the relationship. The precise words are not part of the public record. What is documented is the sequence of events that followed. Harrison later told the coroner he left the house at 9 in the evening. Other sources, unconfirmed but consistent in their timeline, place his departure closer to midnight. He went to the home of actor Roland Culver on nearby Napoli Drive. What Carole did after he left is partially reconstructible. She made phone calls. According to accounts from people close to her family, she tried to reach several friends that night, including a woman named Marguerite Hames. The calls went unanswered. Marguerite received Carole's message later that evening but decided it was too late to return the call. She collected photographs, mementos, letters, everything she had kept from the relationship with Harrison. She put them in a suitcase. Then, at some point in the night, the exact hour is not established, she drove to Roland Culver's house on Napoli Drive and left the suitcase in his driveway. She also left a note there saying she intended to kill herself. Roland Culver did not find the suitcase or the note until the following day. He subsequently burned the contents. Back at Capri Drive, at some point in the hours between midnight and tea, in the morning, Carole Landis took a large quantity of Seconal. Her autopsy would later establish that her blood alcohol content was 0.12, 3 points below the legal threshold for intoxication in California. She was not drunk. She was not incapacitated by alcohol. She had taken enough barbiturate to stop her heart. Her body was found on the bathroom floor, head resting on a jewelry box, arms bent as though she had been trying to raise herself. This is the part that requires specific attention. Rex Harrison, at Roland Culver's house on Napoli Drive, did not call Carole that night. Did not call to check on her after ending a year-long relationship in the manner it had apparently been ended. Did not call, as far as the public record establishes, until the following afternoon. When he returned to 1465 Capri Drive on July 5th, he arrived to find Fannie Mae Bolden, Carole's maid, at the house. According to Fannie's account at the coroner's inquest, Harrison came through the door and said, almost immediately, "I think she's dead." Then they went upstairs together. They found Carole on the bathroom floor. Harrison put his hand on her arm. He said, "I feel a little life." Then he left the house. He did not call a doctor. He did not call the police. He did not call an ambulance. He walked out of the house and he left Fannie Mae Bolden, Carole's maid, alone in a house with a woman who might still have been alive, to figure out what to do next. Fannie went to a neighbor's house. The neighbor called the police. According to one account, before returning to the house with police, Harrison had driven home and telephoned Darryl Zanuck. It was Zanuck's studio. It was Zanuck's star. It was Zanuck who decided what happened next. What happened next was this. By the time the police arrived at 1465 Capri Drive that afternoon, the machinery of studio protection was already in motion. The police found the note Carole had written to her mother, an apology, an expression of love, the words of a woman who had run out of options and knew it. They found Fannie Mae Bolden. They found the body. They also found, according to Fannie's testimony and the later testimony of Carole's close friend Florence Wasson, a second note in the bedroom. Florence Wasson described it to the coroner as a memo about Carole's cat, Miss C, needing to go to the veterinarian. However, Carole's mother Clara Ritz told investigators plainly that there was nothing wrong with the cat. Lily Palmer later acknowledged, in her memoir Change Lobsters and Dance, that a police officer had found a personal note Carole wrote to Rex Harrison. She acknowledged that she and Harrison paid the officer $500 to destroy it. The note disappeared from the scene on July 5th. At the coroner's inquest 3 days later, Rex Harrison testified under oath that he was not aware of any second suicide note addressed to him. This is what $500 bought in Los Angeles in 1948. A destroyed letter, a sworn denial, a clean record. July 8, 1948. 3 days after Carole Landis was found on her bathroom floor, Rex Harrison arrived at the coroner's inquest with Darryl F. Zanuck, the man who had ended the affair, and the man who ran the studio that employed them both. Side by side, walking into a formal proceeding together, as though the arrangement between them, the one that had been protecting Harrison's interests since the moment Zanuck learned Winchell was going to publish, was simply standard professional courtesy. Deputy Coroner Ira Nance questioned Harrison. Harrison said he and Carole were friends. Said they had spent the evening discussing scripts for a new play he was developing and the possibility of her taking a role in it. Said they had talked about her plans to return to England in August. Said he left at 9. Said he had no explanation for why she had taken her own life. Said he had no knowledge of a second suicide note. Nance asked, "Do you know of any motive for or suicide?" Harrison answered, "I'm sorry, but I can't give you any explanation for it at all." Fannie Mae Bolden testified. She told the inquest that Harrison had come to dinner every night that week, that Carole had been in good spirits, that when Harrison arrived on the afternoon of the 5th, his first words to her were, "I think she's dead," before they had gone upstairs, before he could have seen anything. Fannie also testified that she saw 2 notes in the bedroom. Florence Wasson testified that she saw 2 notes as well. Clara Ritz, Carole's mother, told investigators there was nothing wrong with the cat. The second note was never produced. Harrison denied its existence under oath. The $500 transaction that had removed it from the scene was not mentioned during the inquest, because the only people who knew about it were the people who had arranged it. The coroner accepted Harrison's testimony. The cause of death was recorded as barbiturate poisoning due to ingestion of an overdose of Seconal. Manner of death: suicide. Case closed. I have read accounts of those first 48 hours from 5 separate sources. Every single one of them stops short of the same question. How long did Harrison actually know she was alive when he left? That question was never formally asked. That question was precisely what $500 and a studio chief's presence in the room had been designed to prevent. The newspapers the morning of July 6th ran photographs of Carole's body. Not metaphorically, the actual photographs taken at the scene before it was cleared. They ran on the front pages of papers across the country. Some of them ran alongside photographs of her at her most glamorous. The studio portraits, the war bond tour pictures, the careful publicity images Fox had distributed when they still considered her useful. The juxtaposition was not incidental. It was the visual language the industry had always used for women who died inconveniently. Glamour, then ruin. Beauty, then this. The headline that appeared in multiple papers across the country read, "The actress who could have been, but never was." Someone wrote that. An editor approved it. It ran on the same day her mother was still being notified. Rex Harrison's film contract with Fox was dropped in the aftermath of the scandal. This is the detail that tends to get cited as evidence that the industry had some mechanism of accountability. Look, there were consequences. He lost his contract. The contract loss was temporary. Harrison went on to Anne of the Thousand Days in 1964. He won the Academy Award for My Fair Lady that same year. He was nominated for a BAFTA. He gave interviews for decades. He was asked about Carole Landis occasionally, and he maintained, until the end of his life, the position he had established on July 8, 1948 in a room with Darryl Zanuck sitting beside him. They were friends. He had no explanation for it. He was married 6 times total. Lily Palmer was the second. Fox's Unfaithfully Yours, the Harrison film that had been completed and previewed before Carole's death, had its release deliberately delayed to avoid association with the scandal. The studio's own marketing department quietly buried a film whose title had become, in the summer of 1948, An Uncomfortable Mirror. Darryl Zanuck continued to run 20th Century Fox for another 15 years. Carole Landis was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale on July 10, 1948. Among the celebrities at her funeral were Cesar Romero, Van Johnson, and Pat O'Brien. Rex Harrison attended with his wife. If there is a single image that captures what this story actually is, not the scandal version, not the Hollywood tragedy version, but the version that tells you how the machinery worked, it is that one. Rex Harrison, standing at the graveside of the woman he had last seen alive on her bathroom floor, with Lily Palmer beside him. Having denied the relationship under oath. Having let the note be destroyed. Having called the studio before the ambulance. Standing there like a mourner. Carole's family never believed the official account. Her grandmother Dorothy Ritz hired a private detective after the police declined to investigate further. The detective told her only what could be said given what remained. That people had been paid, and evidence had been destroyed. Carole's secretary and close friend Nan Stewart told the family there had been a cover-up. No one with institutional power was interested in hearing it. Her great-niece Tammy Powell later wrote on the Carole Landis family website, "Aunt Carole's death has haunted my family for 62 years, and knowing Rex Harrison never paid for what he did only makes it worse. We may never know the truth about her death, but we do know that the official version just doesn't make sense. The official version never did make complete sense. It was not designed to make complete sense. It was designed to close a case quickly and protect the people who needed protecting. In 1948, in Hollywood, those two requirements were nearly always the same project. Set aside the affair. Set aside Rex Harrison entirely for a moment. Look at what Carole Landis actually did. She reinvented herself from poverty in Wisconsin, to a teenage runaway in San Francisco, to a genuine film actress in 14 years. She appeared in 28 pictures. She entertained troops across more than 125,000 miles during wartime, including active combat zones, coming back ill on every tour and going back anyway. She wrote a book. She had a genuine comic instinct that the trade publications, when they mentioned her at all, buried under 3 paragraphs about her figure. She refused, repeatedly and at professional cost, to be managed into silence by men who wanted her compliant. She ended the arrangement with Zanuck when she chose to, knowing exactly what it would cost her. She knew the cost. She paid it. She kept working. The industry's respo. NSE to all of this was to give her smaller pictures. Then no pictures. Then a front-page photograph of her body on the bathroom floor and a headline informing readers she had never quite made it. The films that 20th Century Fox had been quietly developing for bigger female stars in 1945. The pictures that should have been hers, that the architecture of her career and talent had been pointing toward, went to other women. Women who had been more manageable, more careful, more willing to absorb the machinery's requirements without complaint. Her Hollywood Walk of Fame star is at 1765 Vine Street. It was installed after her death. The industry that spent 15 years limiting what she was allowed to become put her name in the sidewalk once she was no longer in a position to object to the terms. There are things this story cannot resolve with certainty. Whether Rex Harrison told Carole explicitly, in that final dinner over cold chicken and lemon chiffon pie, that he was not leaving Lily Palmer, or whether that was a truth she had been assembling slowly for months and the dinner merely confirmed it. Whether there were additional conversations that night that the record doesn't capture. Whether he knew when he left how close to the edge she was. Whether the hours before the call were hours of self-protection or hours of something darker. What can be said on the basis of what is documented? Carole Landis went to a stranger's driveway in the middle of the night and left a note saying she intended to die. She made phone calls that went unanswered. She took a fatal quantity of pills. She was found on her bathroom floor with her arms bent as though she had been trying to get up. Rex Harrison found her, confirmed she had some pulse, and left to go call the studio. A note she wrote to him was purchased and destroyed by his wife. He testified under oath that he knew nothing about any of it. 3 days after she died, he sat in a formal proceeding with his employer Bess, eyed him and told the deputy coroner they were just friends. There is a sentence from Lily Palmer's memoir that the people who have written about this case tend to quote and then move past too quickly. She writes that she knew Rex must have been with Carole the night of the suicide. She writes that she stood by him through the coroner's inquest, that she answered questions from the press, that the two of them denied any romantic relationship with Landis at all. She put this in a book, under her own name, years after the inquest. The cover-up wasn't a secret by the time she published those words. It was a confession in a literary memoir, safe in its specificity, unreachable by the mechanisms of accountability that might have mattered in 1948. Carole Landis spent her whole life in rooms designed to limit what she was allowed to be. She survived most of them. The last one she did not. Born on New Year's Day, 1919. Died the morning after the 4th of July, 1948. 29 years old. The lemon chiffon pie she had made herself was still on the counter when the police arrived. Old money scandals. If this story stayed with you, it should. Subscribe so the women history buried stay visible.